want to thank everybody for coming. This is a public information discussion about the annex building. One thing I want to say before we get going is, in this room I know there's a lot of passion. That's why everybody's here. There's a lot of passion for, a lot of passion for different ideas of what we can do with the annex. So I just want to say one thing. Ruth Bergeron, you here? There we go.
Yes, right here.
So before we get going, Ruth, you and I are friends. We know each other from different areas. Whatever happens in this meeting tonight, we're still going to be friends.
Oh yeah, and we'll argue about stuff forever.
Absolutely. So I understand that the passion is there. We just want to make sure that we are all good as a community. So what I'd like to do is start off by talking a little bit about the history of where we stand right now with the Plainfield High School Annex. For those who don't know, there was an annex, and first of all, making sure everybody can hear me. We're okay? All right. There was a Plainfield High School Annex Building Committee, and that was started in 2004, ended in 2005. We had a recommendation and a vote from the committee to do something with the annex. At the time, it was Jeter, Cook, and Jepson who was the architect, and it was also Turner Construction working on the actual plans for the demolition of the what at the time was the newer high school portion. But the question came forward as to what to do with the annex. So that committee came forward and voted to bring it to a town meeting, which was held, not a large turnout, but it was a town meeting. And what happened there was they decided to hold on to the annex. There were a lot of different things that were offered to do in the what to do with the building, but at the time there was absolutely no money at the time. So that was 2005, and that's, if anybody ever wants to take a look, we do have these. I have a of mine from the original meeting. And also the people that were on the committee are also listed here as well. From that, and that was 2005 when the new high school was started, and we then go forward to looking to move forward and do something with the building. There was a group that was interested in the building. We turned it over to them. They did nothing with it, and there was a reverter clause in there saying, hey, we're going to turn it back to the town of Plainfield. So the next part of that is trying to find something to do with that building. In 2018 and 19, there was a Plainfield High School Annex Conditions Assessment and Feasibility Study. And for those people who haven't seen a copy, there are copies available. You've probably seen it online as well. There's a link to it. So if anybody is interested in taking a look, that's there and available. The assessment there was also the same as far as what to do with the building. And there were things that were very similar: education, civic, community. There was also some numbers that came with it. I think if you take a look in the packet that you had in the back of the room that was available, if anybody can get the one, there would be some more in the back. But it talks about the Plainfield High School Annex, and then at that time the magnitude of the cost in 2018. So from that study then, it was $9,310,000 to start the work on moving it forward. In your packet, you'll probably see the next page, and the next page is talking about the order of magnitude of cost in this day and age, and how the numbers have escalated. I did get some of the numbers from different groups, but those are definitely escalated numbers as to today's market. We're talking about the cost of work, cost of materials. If anybody goes out to the Home Depot or Lowe's and tries buying wood right now, good luck. So if you take a look at the following page, it talks about the cost to maintain. And I'll use hypotheticals at this point. If hypothetically the town of Plainfield was to say we want to keep the building and to move forward with it, what are the costs? To maintain it on a regular basis, annual basis, is $156,000. And you'll see some of the numbers that I put in there for that. The next page over talks about if you have to go out to bond. If you're bonding this building and you're talking about, and I know this number is just a little different, but it was put at $15 million. I asked the town finance director to put something together for me. She did. Usually you bond a little higher, but not that much higher. But anyways, the numbers are over a 20-year period. Take a look towards the bottom. What you're looking at is also 20 years, but you also have this, the ban. There's a ban, meaning if the town was to vote for something right now to say, let's do the work and keep it, between now, it's voted on, and it's actually now operational, you have to take out a ban. It's a temporary note. You have to pay for that until it becomes operational. Once operational, that's when your bond starts for 20 years. So what you see in front of you here is what the current mill rate is and a projected mill rate, and they're trying to give you an idea of just apples to apples. If this was to go forward, roughly how much it would cost you for your tax dollars. So this isn't just a matter of, hey, we're going to put something together and put it and bring it forward. This is also how much it's going to cost you. I would add one more thing to this. If you see there that says the annual increase for a house valued at $100,000, your annual increase for your taxes is $100. But then you're also talking about the $156,000, which will be in your budget every year for 20 years, or continuation after that. So I did put it in there because I did ask our grant writer to do a couple things. Jordan Lumpkins is here with us tonight. Jordan, I asked him to do two things. One was to look for grants that might be able to help you to build up the building, and the other grant would be for what happens if you were to knock down the building. Now, this is the cost estimate from a company, and there were some things we talked about in the past. I think it was an article in the paper and talked about what could you do with the property if you were to build it up, if you were to knock it down, and if you were to do something with it after you knocked it down. And I think the idea that I threw out there was if you were to have a farmer's market on there similar to what Putnam has. Something to that effect. So in doing so, Jordan made a great point. He was talking about how you can apply some of the demolition costs towards another grant, and that would be your in-house cost towards it, so your matching monies. So that's what we have so far, but I do have one more thing, Kyle, if you wouldn't mind. Kyle knows the school very well, so I've asked Kyle to give some, do a little video for us. If anybody's having a problem seeing it, if you don't mind coming up to the front, that's fine.
Okay, last week we went there and took some pictures. Some of these are some stock photos. The building is in very, very bad shape now. We went through it. There was water coming down all over the place. The tiles that this building was made out of are all structural. What you're seeing right now, this is the cafeteria. The school has stored some stuff there, which they're not claiming now. So there's desks, chairs, buffers, bookcases. You can see we have some playground equipment in there. This is just a little video going around. Okay, you can see all the ceilings have got black mold on them too, from it just being wet for the last 15 years. The upper roof has got holes in it this big. Now that roof is not original to the building. The building actually had parapets and a flat roof. So what they did is they put this roof on top, and so there's still a rubber roof underneath there. So that needs to be fixed. The walls are, because they've been frozen, they're falling apart now. This is the first floor looking south. There's the main entrance. The next picture is the first floor. That's looking north. The ceilings have all collapsed. 2 years ago, you can see the black mold there. This was the administration room. This was either the teacher's room or the home ec room. I'm not quite sure on that. This is another first floor classroom. And this is, you can see all those white lines there. That's all hairline cracks in the concrete that weren't there 3 years ago. Okay, it gets wet, it freezes. And same thing here, all those little cracks, we've got rebar showing through. The study that they did in 19, we didn't have these structural faults. So that number that you see there to redo it, it's actually going to be much higher, because you're going to have to jackhammer some of this stuff out and put in new structural concrete. This is another classroom on the first floor. This is up on the second floor, and you can see the ice there. Those are the structural tiles, and now they are pretty compromised. If you're in there and actually look at them, you can see where they're starting to spread apart from the ice freezing in there. Same thing, there's another classroom, a lot of black mold. This is going down into what used to be the boys' locker room. This is the boys' locker room. That's in really bad shape. And we're going to go further down, and there's the old water tank down in the basement. I'm not sure what that is right there, but something spilled. This is that was the old sump pit, that the scuppers, all the water from the roof would go down into there, and then it would be ejected out into a catch basin. Well, that got plugged up over the years, so it didn't work. This is still in the basement. At one point, do you see that line right there? That's how high the water was in the basement. It was up to here. That was the electrical box. That's about the only good thing left in the building at this point. That lintel was cracked. It's collapsing. I probably should have wore a hard hat. All this material here, we had cleaned it all out once, and then the schools filled it back up with more garbage. All right, now we're going back upstairs. This was the ceiling that collapsed. All these wires, and you can see what it is. It's pretty self-explanatory. This is from all the water and freezing. It's coming right off the walls. This is going up the stairway. All the floors are all buckled. Same thing here. Here's all your structural tiles, all frozen, and they're cracking. So we could get a structural engineer in there again. I don't see the point in it at this juncture. I mean, we have to decide what we want to do with this building, but it's severely compromised at this point. All right, this is the second floor. You can see all the mold, the water. Same thing here. The water's just pouring down the walls inside there. And this was a cold day. This is on the second floor here. Same thing, second floor, all the structural tiles. You can see where they're all cracked. There have been vandals in the place, because when the place first closed, we winterized it. None of this was broken like that. There's snow coming in through the windows. There's many broken windows. Now we're going up towards the third floor, where the birds have kind of made a mess here. All right, this window was wide open. I closed it when we were there. That's all snow from the storm of the weekend. This is all bird droppings. So there's some places where it's 4 inches thick, because the windows are broken from kids throwing rocks at it. This is the hallway on the third floor. I think that was my French classroom when I was in 7th grade. And this, you can see the rebars coming through. We've got structural cracks. You can see here, this is all the concrete. It's all cracking in both directions. And this is the scupper from the roof, the flat roof. That used to be connected, and it would go to the outside and then down into that pit. And that's where all the water, there's tons of water coming in there right now. So that's what we have right now. So you all know what's in that building.
Thank you, Kyle. So we had you went in, you also had your fire marshal going in.
Yeah, the fire marshal, he was in a couple of those pictures. He came with me too.
So I understand it is very compromised.
Yeah.
And there's a question of you know, asking for a structural engineer to go in and review it, but there's some areas that just,
Yeah, it's in real bad shape.
yep. So that's where we stand right now. We wanted to inform the public of what it looks like, where we got to from day one to here, and see what their options are. I will ask that if anybody would like to speak, if they come up to the microphone to speak, and just give me your name so I can just keep record of it, that's fine. I'm sure everybody has an idea or an opinion, that's fine. I just want to make sure I keep track of everybody. So if anybody would like to go to the microphone to speak right now, give an idea or an opinion, that's fine.
My name is Madeline Sidlow, and I have a question. At the end of the feasibility study, it was recommended that the building be mothballed and that there were still possibilities for the building. When I saw the windows being boarded, I couldn't understand why the roof, those holes in the roof weren't being boarded up at the same time, because that was really the worst problem.
It's just a matter of timing, Madeline. We're trying to get things to be safe so people can't get into it. And then we would have had to put a lot of money into something else just to mothball it. The question would be, I would say at this point is, you can mothball something, but you should be putting your money to, in other words, if you're going to mothball it, should be putting the idea of you're going to do something with it. So to have a plan, what's the plan to mothball it for?
Well, there were many possibilities at the time. I know there's a great emphasis in Connecticut on manufacturing educational, vocational education, and there's there's money even available for those vocations. That was one of the many, many possibilities, but we never really explored to see if we could get funds for such things. Another thing I would ask you to consider is trying to put it up for sale. I noticed that the Warwigan Mills right now are for sale, and there is a publication called Preservation in Connecticut, and the Warwigan Mills are pictured in there as for sale. And I just think we should access all resources available before we destroy it.
Okay.
I would ask you to take that into consideration.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Paul Sweet, 260 New Road, Moosup, Connecticut. I have a long history with the building. That building, quite frankly, when they had a meeting to save that building, there was about 13 people that attended that meeting, and a low turnout in a referendum. Be it as it may, I appeal to everyone's common sense tonight. The building is sitting there. You're talking, let's just say the old number's good. Let's just say it's 10 million, new number's 13 million. Either way, who are we to go out and take a building that we don't need? I see the word historic pops up on a lot of different documents. I'm not sure of the definition of historic, but the fact of the matter is it's about a 100-year-old building. There are buildings throughout this town that are historic. I don't think the taxpayer would appreciate us going out and borrowing money and start fixing people's houses up because they're historic and just give it back to them. We don't need another education building because we have plenty. We don't need to be in the business of real estate. $13 million bond issue with the only thing that I could find leading up to this, that there may be some money for the hazardous material demolition, but there's no money out there that's going to offset this so-called $13 million bond project. So we're going to pay the freight. The taxpayers are going to be asked to pay the freight. And if I look at this right, you're looking at a mill increase basically on for the first bond payment, and then down you go. Here's the point. The building, if you're gonna go and spend $13 million, and that's all you're gonna have to start with, after you tear everything out with a steel frame, and then we're not sure, why would you spend $13 million on an existing building like that, when anybody in business would take $13 million and go find a piece of property and build a modern facility? Now, I had sentimental value to the old high school. Matter of fact, you know, I really wasn't in favor of a new high school, but I got persuaded by some people, teachers, and different folks. They got to my other side and that appealed to the future. I don't regret the fact that we supported and put a new high school up, but there was a lot of sentimental value to all of us. A lot of kids went through them doors, okay? And I think it's the same idea tonight as some folks that might have went to school there. And they got some sentimental ties. But the idea of historic, that we got something special here, this is nothing but an albatross. This is a money pit. And to go spend $13 million, for what reason? Just because we want to save the building, which is all going to be torn out except for the steel. If it can stay there, and you don't know until you really get into it to find out. So Kevin, people, I understand people's emotions, and I support historicals, and I support everybody. Everybody's got an opinion. But I will tell you, I will lead this town against the $13 million bond issue that we're going to put at the feet of the taxpayers. We're going to defeat any issue of $13 million to keep that building and restore it. Because it's not fair. It's not fair to people. Everybody in here tonight has an opinion, got an interest, but common sense has got to come, it's got to rise above it. We have to recognize this has got to be more than just saving a building. Okay? So I'm not for spending another nickel, with the exception of taking it apart, taking it down, whatever they have to do. And I'm all for maybe another project down the road. I read somewhere farmer's market. I grew up on a farm. I'm kind of sensitive to that stuff. Sentimental again, but maybe that'd be a nice thing. We can't go down that far. Right now, you're talking about this building tonight, and I am telling you that whole building, the heating system, the water system, the electrical system, all came from the old high school. So when you severed that old high school, you shut off everything. We had one line run into a pole sitting out in the parking lot, so we had a light bulb to turn on in the hallway. All the utilities were shut off. There's no furnace, there's no power, there's no nothing. So you're talking about all that's got to be self-sufficient. It's all got to be purchased. The elevator most likely, maybe it can be refurbished, but again, why would we $13 million with no reimbursement? Now, if somebody gets up here tonight and said, well, there's grant money available, I'm going to tell you something. When we did the school up by Better Value, we got back 78 cents on the dollar. And there was a need for the school. All right? That's the only reason we were persuaded to go forward. Now, the people backed it. We sold it to the people. I don't regret that. But the third floor was not part of that deal. And I left office at that time. And all of a sudden there was a decision made to redo the third floor. And we moved all the administration to the third floor. In hindsight, probably one of the best decisions they made. But when I came back into office, the state was conducting an audit on that bond issue. And guess what? I got a bill for $900,000 that was not project eligible. So we had to pay back. We worked this out with the state of Connecticut. We paid them $100,000 a year for the portion that was not project eligible. Now, here's the point. With no reimbursement, there is no grant out there that's going to even lighten the load on $13 million. We're going to go this alone. And I just don't think it's right. That building should have been taken down when they had a good number to take it down. Sentimental feelings, people that supported it back then either moved out of town, passed away, grown old. Kevin, my opinion, and humble opinion, is that I can't support this. And I can tell you right now, there's a lot of folks that just can't reason with this. They're not here tonight. They're not gonna go out and approve $13 million to rehabilitate that building for no reason. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to come on?
I'm Ellen Najali, and I hope that this is not an evening to vote on anything, that it's an informational meeting, because something like this needs to be decided by the whole town. And in my opinion, I can see it, like Paul Sweet, I wouldn't want to throw another nickel to it. I think it should be down, and also, what's the rush of putting something else up and using the land? Green grass is fine until you have a real use for it. That's just my quick opinion.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Virginia, San Pietro, 29 Highland Street, Worcester. It's my understanding that this building is on the National Historic Register. And isn't that something that could be tapped to get funding to renovate, the grant funding?
I defer to Jordan, and Jordan has told me before that that's nothing we can really.
So there's a couple things, but it really compares it to $13 million. It's a fraction. So with the state, there's a $200,000 matching grant, and federally, there's this year it's $500,000. It used to be $700,000. So it's decreasing in terms of historic restoration. So it's a fraction.
And I guess also, doesn't that, don't you need to notify them?
Again, this is why we're talking about it, because eventually we get to go to vote on it, and that's when we start that process, if that process is going that way.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Cunningham, residents of Plainfield. My name is Taylor Jackala, 44 Railroad Ave. I'd like to start us off with that. I don't have a plan for how to take action on this historic building. Originally opened in 1923, it has graduated 83 years of classes. Significant members who have contributed to the historical record of our town and state, including famed athletes, members of our House of Representatives, House of Senate, successful CEOs and entrepreneurs, political figures, and just members of our family and friends. How many of you have went to school to the Annex, just out of curiosity? May I ask?
My mother taught there.
Absolutely.
My children
So,
live there.
Everyone has their own passion and view on this. Watching the video that Mr. Collins made is very eye-opening. To a lot of you, I can understand why $13, $14, $15 million, hypothetically, is a lot of money. However, as I said, I don't have an idea. I just appreciate the discussion here. With the destruction of the Annex, the rumored destruction of St. John's School, the uncertainty of All Hallows, and Moosup Elementary approaching, what, 75, 65 years of age? That's 4 schools and at least 250 years of history that we will be bulldozing in the next 2 decades. A lot of things I hear is, the number one thing for the pro-renovation of the Annex is give it back to the community. It was, you know, people say community center, rec center, civic center, all these things are a centralized library, a public gymnasium. All these things are viable and wonderful ideas. What I'm wondering is if the town votes to alleviate these costs from the budget of a proposed, potentially $15 million, is there a plan to go forward with something that the community has voiced to me, at least, desperately wants? And if we save the $15 million at a high estimate, will there be a plan set in motion to provide this community with a center, which, like a community center, essentially. And that also being said, I would like to also ask if there's anything we can do in the future to prevent this from happening. An analogy I've been using to explain to a lot of people who don't necessarily aren't as interested as people here in this room. You know, it's exciting, town politics. But imagine if we were gifted a sports car. 1920s Bugatti, let's say. Let's say, you know what, it's not feasible to buy, to repair this. Let's garage it. But instead of, you know, draining the oil, the fluids, putting it on jack, making sure it's secure and locked garage that's climate controlled, we leave it in the front yard by the mailbox with the hood up and the windows down. And then almost 2 decades later we approach it, try to turn it over, this gosh darn thing won't start. How does this happen? And I don't think anyone specific, any administration of this town is to blame for this, because it's kind of like a white elephant. The viable option moving forward at the time, when the closure of the school in 2004, 2005. What I would like to ask is there any plans for ordinance in the town going forward to protect our historical buildings? Blight laws, things like that, requirements for like inspection. Even a mowed lawn can prevent structural damage. Just the tiny things going forward that every one of us makes every day about our proud community can do a lot to maintain these properties going forward. Something else I would like to ask is, if the annex is voted for demolition, is there a plan to find a reputable contractor to do so that won't leave us with a situation such as Inner Royal, with Command, with South Main Street Moose Up? Are we going to build another Dollar General there? Are we a pizza pasta restaurant? Or are we going to use the money we save to give back to the town? This is a proud town. This community's got Panther pride worldwide. That's something I've always said. I stand by it wholeheartedly. I don't have a solution here today. I don't have $13 million to just give to the town. I wish I did. Trust me, I wish I did. Because the annex is a wonderful building. It's a perfect example of the architectural styling and period of its time. And it deserves consideration and respect for what it has given us as an icon that has represented us and the Plainfield Panthers and our friends and families for almost 100 years. And to just see it just cast aside because of dollar bills, that's not respectful to it. And I appreciate you hosting this meeting, and, you know, thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Taylor. Taylor, before you go, there's something I wanted to say. I do go on to the social media sites. I go on to Facebook.
Yeah, we've spoken a couple times.
Yes. And I want to share one or two things with you. I appreciate and enjoy your passion. You have some fantastic passion about the history of the town of Plainfield. I see the things that you post on the, you know you're from Plainfield if. And one of the things you mentioned in there is something you mentioned tonight. And I really want to say that, is there anything that we can learn from this? And I think that is really something that we can do, is learn from it. What we can do is learn that we need to maintain what we have so we don't lose it in the future.
Yes, sir. That's honestly the point that I think that in today's climate, with the cost of construction, maintenance.
Yep, and you talked about a blight. I talked about that. Marion proposed a blight ordinance. We still have to talk about that as selectmen. We have to talk about what might work for that. And I think that might be something that, if you'd like to be helping us do, to talk about how your vision of blight might be, because it's something that's very important.
Absolutely.
And as far as what you mentioned also with the contractor, somebody's going to be sure that they do it right. If you take a look on that back packet that's in there, that company is also on the, so everybody knows, that company is also on the state bid process, so they are...
Do you know any other large projects that they may have done?
We can get all the history on it, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay. But they're on the state bid process, so.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I just want to try to answer some of your concerns. But thank you very much.
Absolutely. I appreciate your time.
Inchinati, Town Planner. I was part of the 2019 study for the annex that was funded by the State Historic Preservation Office. The building is on the National Register of Historic Places as a contributing resource to the Central Village National Register Historic District, and it's also on the State Historic Register as a contributing building. Unfortunately, the building has been not maintained since it's been vacated, which has contributed greatly to its deteriorating condition. The town's plan of conservation and development, which is basically a 10-year vision of where the town wants to see itself go, recommends preservation and protection of the town's historic buildings and resources, and adaptive reuse, which this building could be adaptively reused. Unfortunately, like I said, it's been neglected to be maintained over so many years, like so many municipal buildings that are vacated and state buildings that are vacated. They end up being ignored to the point where they have to be taken down. I don't believe that this building is at that point yet. I do believe that there is funding available to help clean up the building, to shore it up, to repair it, to take care of the environmental issues that it has, and to bring it back to an adaptive reuse. The 2019 study cited a number of things that people would like to see, and whether or not that meeting was attended by the whole town or a portion of the town. The people that showed up cared enough to show up and voice their considerations. And the primary desire, the number one, was education of some sort. As we know, not every high school student is college bound for whatever reason. And it makes sense with, especially with the manufacturing that companies need now. They have to go out of town, out of state, to find trained workers. Turning that into that type of a trade school where the high school kids could get their book learning, quote unquote, on the hill, and then come down to the annex for their training, for their trades. And that would get them out of high school with a job that pays them enough to earn a living wage. And they wouldn't have to worry about, do I have the grades to go to college? Do I have the money to go to college? Am I going to have to pay back student loans forever? The longer that building is left to deteriorate, the worse condition it's going to be in. So I really encourage the town to work toward seeing something happen that would, because it's not only an important physical structure to the landscape of Plainfield and Central Village, but it's also an important structure to the historical landscape of the town, and it would be a shame to lose that.
Thank you. The question came up about putting it back into education, and because when the town turned it over to, Board of Ed turned it over to the town, it no longer contains education as a use of that building unless you reapply for it. It takes a long time to do that, and again, the trade schools, in my opinion, are in the area. We also have at the Plainfield High School, like, we have a member of Board of Ed, but we do have some trades. I know that one of them has actually, there's actually 2 or 3 that are going on right now. Just want to get clarification on how many we have and what they are.
Thank you. Mike Broughton, 9 Pond Street, Plainfield. I do also serve on the Board of Ed, but I am just speaking here tonight as a citizen and edifying what does go on. One of the programs that we do have at the high school is a manufacturing program. Since the high school is now broken up into academies, you can graduate with a certificate that will put you directly into the manufacturing pipeline. As It's one of the best things that we've done in the high school in the past few years. The other issues that they have is a CNA program. They were volunteering right next door before the Romans broke out all over the place. And we are working on getting a couple of other programs in there as well. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question, Mr. Cunningham.
Yep.
Is the extra stored material inside of the annex currently feasible and usable, or is it also part of we got to get rid of this because it's covered with black mold?
It's a little of each, and I'll explain a little bit of that. There is a picture that was towards the beginning of the video that showed you some of the buffers, and it was like 5 or 6 buffers that were in that area. There was also a push-behind buffer, which would work right in here. There was also a compressor, I think, was in there.
Compressor.
Yep, and the reason why they're there is because they weren't working from the high school, and that's why they left them there. Doesn't mean we can't take them, clean them, see if we can get someone to try to fix them, but there's a cost value to that as well. So there are a few things that we could utilize, and that's not much. You were mentioning, Kyle, before that the electric panel
Yeah.
is something that could be reused. There was also some scaffolding that was in there that you saw a picture of.
Yeah, we could take
So
that
there's
out.
very few things that you could utilize from there, but yes, the rest of it, not much.
Point of order, Kevin.
Yes.
Just so you know, we emptied that building twice on me. And I'm talking truckload. The school, I think they're afraid to throw things away, so they put them over there. And then everything molds up, gets wet, and so we took advantage of Willimantic Waste Paper Company in our contract, and we took truckloads. And I told the school, don't put nothing more, take it down to Willie Bulky Waste and get rid of it. It's free to get rid of for the town. Take it directly there. And now I understand the village is full of all kinds of junk again. And so I understand people know how to throw things away, but there comes a time, if you can't use it and you're going to put it in that building, it's as good as doomed. So either give it to some nonprofit or give it to anybody. Give it to somebody. And that's a big problem. And everything goes in there and it gets ruined, and the town's got to lug it out. And
Agreed.
it's a mess.
This is the third time. I will to let you know, just for how we came to visualize what's going on inside that building. I took Best Tech with us to see how good it is, how bad it is, what are the issues in there. I took a Board of Finance member, Tom Sinkowitz, with me. I also had our fire marshal. We walked through, and exactly what you said, Paul. We saw so many things that were inside of there. There was a industrial snake for snaking out plumbing, which was still usable. There was 2 TIG welders, 1 MIG welder. There was a brand new drop spreader for the back of a truck in the cafeteria area. And yes, that's what their storage area seemed to be. So that's multiple times, and they assured us each time, oh, there's nothing in there, but there was. So we're at that point now where we might be able to salvage a few minor things out of there, but that would probably be it. And yes, you saw the pictures of all the paints and solvents and who knows what's in there. So there's more work to be done on there, so.
Mr. Cunningham,
Yep.
out of curiosity, who is in charge of making the decision to store excess supplies inside of a building that has a leaky roof and is in such bad condition by the town's own point of view?
The town was under the impression that it's their property,
Okay,
but the Board of Ed had the combination to the door.
okay.
We didn't know, and we were told multiple times there's nothing in there. Come to find out, we were surprised when Tom and I walked in, it was like, wait a minute, there's nothing here. What's all this stuff stored? So we've eliminated that issue, we've changed locks. So at this point, that's what's in there is in there.
I went in there once with a brand new John Deere tractor in there. Now I'm not talking a lawnmower, I'm not talking a big farm tractor. I'm talking a significant tractor. I don't know how they got it in there. Okay, the school, to answer his question, the school board sets policy. They got to draft up a policy and give it to the principal, superintendent, whoever, down the chain it goes. When you're going to throw out a computer, don't put it in your annex. If it's not something you can use, either give it away or throw it away. And it's just so much good stuff got ruined up there that I would salvage for the town because I'm cheap. you know, but those guys just, sometimes they just don't give a second.
Adrian, come on.
Hi, my name is Adrian Paulson. Hope you can hear me. So I had a couple of questions and a comment, or more of an idea. So on, I think it's page 2, where it's, well, it's really both pages, where it has the new construction section. What is the source for these estimates? What is that specifically based on in terms of which proposed use of the property? Or is it just a generic?
I think it's a generic at this point. I will mention one thing. In going through the initial 2019 study, they offered 3 options for what you could make it into. By bringing it back into educational, you didn't have to, if you were grandfathered properly, didn't have to put up sprinkler systems. But you would want to do that.
Right.
So that's not in any of that.
Sure.
So, just so you know that.
Okay. So then the jump to 15 million is just a pattern to be sure, more or less?
It's pretty close because we're looking at today's wages and how they've increased. We're looking at the materials, they've totally increased. I mean, they've gone way up. It's just, there's not much wiggle room after that.
Okay, so if I'm reading this correctly, annual increases, we actually took a loan amount of $15 million, would be an increase for the value of the house of $300,000 of $300 per year. Is that correct?
Plus annual budget, you would have to add in the page before, because that's $156,000 for maintaining. That's a very important piece of that, because you, again, once you bring it back up, you don't want it to go back down. So that's another thing you would be paying, yes. You're talking about $300 per year on your taxes, plus on my budget, I have to put that in there as well.
Right, so it could be 400. It could be.
Well, it's that's actually a small portion of a million.
Right. Yeah,
So
but you're talking about the actual increase relative to the increase in the mill rate derived directly from having borrowed 15 million.
Yep.
Okay. All right, the reason why I ask is because it's not provided here, and I haven't seen anywhere yet, some kind of decision scorecard that would bring in all the factors that have been referenced so far, and kind of line them all up so we as the public can see exactly what we're trying to decide here in terms of, I know it's hard to quantify things, but for example, we could look at the annex. I've only been here 6 years, so I do not have the cultural, historical, memory, nostalgia for it, but I respect it. I respect that. So I don't want to just dismiss that. I see both sides. I'm very skeptical. I can't make a decision. I don't have that information. I'm sure there are some other people out here who might want to see maybe more variables put together in some kind of a scorecard, similar to how you rate which car you're going to buy, when you or a house. Oftentimes you put some kind of scorecard together to compare houses.
Well, what type of a scorecard are you looking at? You're looking at return on investment, value of a current?
Yeah, so like I'll give you some examples of the variables. You have a lot of the variables already here. So we know what the estimated cost would be generically. What if we could break it down specifically to each of the costs, the 3 main ones that you said were in the report? So break down the cost for each one, get an estimate, just so that we can have a differentiation. But then also, we have to put some kind of cost next to quality of life. We really do. So do we want to have a community center there? If we don't have it there, where is it going to be? I'm sure that a lot of people, myself included, would like to have a community center. That's actually something that's frequently asked for. And that would be a town thing, not necessarily a community thing. But then what's the cost of that? How much is that going to cost to maintain? That's not free, it's not cheap, but it's worth something to the people. How much is that worth? You know what I mean? We can figure that out. You don't have to pull the entire, you could put out a survey, you could find out what that's worth to people and then compare it. So what each option is in terms of quality of life, what the options bring to people's lives. It might be very little, it might be something, but that's not represented here at all in terms of maybe it's worth $400 a year, for example, on top of your normal expenses to be able to take your kid and drop your children and drop them off to a community center. And, that's just an option. I don't know all the options. There are a lot of options that aren't listed here and their relative costs and relative values in the community. Comparing that to how much money we're going to have to borrow, that would be helpful. Also, another thing that would be helpful is, and I'm sure you're going to provide some of this, or in combination with the members of the economic development team for Plainfield, but also, how many partners are there out there that maybe we could do something with? I know some towns have used an MOU. So you identify partners who want to share some aspect of use of the property, and they become starting partners who help bridge the cost, so it's not just grants. Yes, you want to have your grants, maybe list your top 5 grant possibilities and rate the likelihood of getting them. They can do that too. They can say this grant is extremely unlikely, and if we got it, it's not that much money. Having that all there, the scorecard, so we can then say, well, it's not that much value because we're going to put in a lot of risk, we're going to put in time applying for grants, and I'm going to get this much money, or this much value, versus there is actually value relative to how much money we're going to borrow. So something like that, I think, might be helpful. And we already have all the information, or we can probably get that sort of information relatively quickly. It's probably not that hard to do. That's my guess. It's my answer. But
Thank you.
Gabriel 20 Doriev, thank you for having that up. That video is really important. I think out of everybody here, probably the last one that actually took classes in that annex, but just, I think to help us out here, you've got the cost to maintain that. And would I be correct in saying that we have been paying about that cost to maintain that for the whole time the building's been closed?
No.
No?
If you take a look at what's there, we have that insurance on it, but we do not have staffing over there. Obviously no overtime, or supplies and expenses to maintain, or we're paying for electricity, we're not paying for water, not paying for heat, no refuse disposal, no service maintenance contracts, and no cleaning supplies.
Right, so there's still costs to maintain this going on prospectively, no matter how long we want to sit here and say, I'd like it to be a farmer's market, I'd like it to be a trade school, I'd like it to be a this or that. So the way I'm looking at it, and I don't need to complain, but I think it's a necessary complaint. We seem to have this habit as a town of just studying things and looking at options and, thinking grant money is this big panacea. And quite frankly, there is this thing that we pay the cost, it's called time. I mean, Mother Nature has made a lot of decisions for us. I mean, realistically, the way I look at this, as someone in the legal field, that's a fire waiting to happen. That's an accident waiting to happen. That's an environmental disaster waiting to happen. So every time we kind of have these forums, I'm not sure how many we've done of these. I imagine several over the years. I'd imagine we've had study after study like we do in a row. We just study it, but at the end of the day, we kick the can down the road because we can't separate the facts from the feels. So the bottom line is, yes, after all this time, we do have all the information. It's not going to be in anything because there's just no backing for anything. And going forward, construction materials are going to go up. Loans are going to be harder to get. The bond market's going to have some really bad stuff going on. And all that grant money is going to dry up. So realistically, as I sit here today, the only question I would have, other than to suggest let's put it up for referendum and knock it down, would be, can I drive the wrecking ball? We're at that point. It sounds harsh, but I've lived in an old house I had attachment to. Actually, it was the one that was across from Baker's house, big greenhouse, nice maple trees in front of it. Yeah, I was sad to go. It was built in 1898, but I'm like, you know what? I let the old tank run out. I burned 7 gallons of diesel that night just to turn up the heat, just to see how warm I could get the place. In the plaster walls, it had the nice little steam radiators, and I got a lot of memories in there, just like I do the high school, but I'm like, it really needed to be knocked down. So that just seems where we are. If anybody's got a real plan, we've had plenty of time to come up with a real plan, but I could be persuaded. I just don't exist. Thanks.
Thank you.
Did I copy? 59 Railroad Ave. I walked in here tonight after seeing Taylor's posts on Facebook. I love them as well. I love history. After that presentation, seeing the cost, understanding that grants are not the option that we thought that they were, I think the best bet is to demo it. However, my question is there anything for the historians that can be saved and put up somewhere, here, a new structure, whatever you decide? Is there anything of historical value, if you know what I'm trying to say, that can be saved so that both sides can get what they want, for lack of a better word? So that was my first question, something to consider. The other thing is, I hear what you're saying, that it's no longer an educational building. However, it did belong to the children. Whatever happens with it, my opinion, should stay. Maybe not necessarily, like you said, it's not Board of Ed anymore. Something else for the kids. But it's actually not 13 million, it's 19 million with the interest and everything. That's a whole lot of money, you know? And costs are just gonna keep going up. By the time a decision is going to be made, I'm sure that number is even gonna go higher. So, I don't know if you would have that information, or Kevin, about, you know, salvaging something of historical value, just to preserve some of it, because I get that. I get that it is
There's
historical.
not much in there that's
Or
you can
even,
salvage.
you know, anything.
The old
before they demo
chalkboards
it.
of slate, they're 100 years old. If you can get somebody to take those out, do something with those.
You know,
All the old-
granite signs outside?
What's that?
Granite sign outside?
Yeah, you might be able to get the cornerstones
Yeah,
off the building or
just something so that both sides of the aisle have.
Save the brick,
you know,
we'll sell everybody a
yeah.
brick.
Mr. Collins, I have a question. Did you
Yeah.
happen to take notice of the condition of the murals on the first floors?
You mean the